Yo, yo, what's going on, gamers? It's Max Deshaw with Based Game Reviews, and today we've got our first impressions for Wuchang Fallen Feathers. Let's go. How I played on PS5 with a physical copy. First impressions. The game opens with a weak intro that feels poorly thought out and badly executed. It didn't entice me at all. Once I gained control of Wuchang, my first impressions were very different. The camera was smooth and the responsiveness of the controls were ultra tight and precise. This was a big win. What worked? The game does a great job of interconnecting the various areas in the game with shortcuts, ladders, and doors that only open from one side. Exploring the world and uncovering how it all fit together was a real joy and reminded me a lot of Dark Souls 1's masterful display of this type of level design. I was a big fan of the menu design and hand-drawn art style they used for the game's weapons, items, and spells. This again was a nod to classic Dark Souls, and I thought it worked really well in Wuchang as well. The first handful of bosses were awesome and had cool designs and the right amount of challenge. I was on a roll. Man, I was legitimately pumped. My first 6 hours or so were looking promising. Could this game actually pull this off all the way to the credits? What didn't work? Instead of souls, enemy kills will grant you red mercury, which can be used to purchase items from vendors and of course level up. But instead of simply dumping this resource into vitality, strength, or stamina, for example, you'll have to refine the red mercury, which then gets turned into skill points, and then navigate a complex web of upgrades, much like the sphere grid in Final Fantasy X, to use the points. I hated it. It felt like unnecessary steps. It was messy, clunky, and overly complex. Wuchang also suffers from a mild case of God of War, where it had too many moves and abilities. Too much stuff. Stop with all the options already. The choice to go with British actors in a game loosely based in China, where nearly every NPC has a Chinese name, was odd and felt out of place. While we're on the topic of audio, the sound design was a real weak point for the game as well. Not only did the soundtrack feel dated and, stale, but a lot of instances where I felt like there should have been a sound effect, like certain animations for example, had nothing at all. Something was missing. I like a good challenge. It's part of the reason I'm such a big From Software fan. I've platinumed all their games going back to the original Demon Souls and even done no death and soul level 1 runs of Dark Souls. I understand that a certain level of perseverance is required to learn enemy movement patterns and master timing and stamina management, but Wuchang took it to another level, and one that I'm not so sure I'm comfortable with. They just turned it up to 11. No, more like 13. For what? Just to be difficult on purpose? This is the biggest pitfall that I think these Souls-like games are making. Don't make it difficult just for the sake of being difficult. That's not the selling point of these games. It's much more nuanced than that. Wuchang has a boss in its first 10 hours that I died to more than 100 times. My previous record was either Amygdala in the Chalice dungeons of Bloodborne or Ishin the Sword Saint in Sekiro, which is the final boss of that game, by the way. Neither of which I surpassed the triple-digit death mark. What the hell were they thinking? I eventually swallowed my pride and looked up some YouTube strats, but it wasn't a massive leap in progress. It didn't get much better after this either. The next area in the game was an absolute horror show filled with landmines, enemies shooting at me from places I couldn't reach, and cannons firing at me from hidden blind spots. It was a disaster. All I could do was just laugh in disbelief at what I was witnessing. There was no way in hell this was the actual game. Something was broken, right? They couldn't have possibly approved this in development and thought we would enjoy it. Yes, they did. I also want to point out that I encountered multiple instances where the game completely froze on me and I was worried the whole thing was going to crash. Luckily it didn't, but yeah, this was still super janky and immersion breaking. I spent the next 10 hours of gameplay on 2 bosses before I decided that I'd seen enough. I'm a pretty calm dude, but I've never in my life wanted to smash my controller into my TV so many times. What were these feelings I was experiencing? This wasn't me. This wasn't fun anymore. Why did I feel like I needed to prove something? I didn't want this game to get the best of me, I guess. But I let it go because the pain and frustration was just not worth it. My biggest issue with these bosses comes down to two things. One, they have an unreal amount of health, and my weapons were doing what felt like chip damage, so the fights were drawn out forever. I have been leveling up, right? It felt like I was at level 1 facing a mid-game boss. And 2, they have relentless attack patterns that never seem to end, so even after dodging, okay, now it's my turn, right? I'd get smoked by another attack that took off close to half my health bar. The reward was rarely worth the effort. Worth continuing. After 20-something hours of gameplay, I looked up a walkthrough only to discover that I was only about a quarter of the way through the game. I have no problem at all with big games. I love them, but I wasn't about to torture myself through 60 more hours of this bullshit. Final thoughts. It's a real shame because I thought Wuchang started off pretty strong and had potential. I wanted to see more of the world and uncover its secrets, but the utter failure of imposing this false difficulty was too much of a deterrent.